So we'll start out by welcoming everybody. It's good to see you all again. I hope you had a good weekend. Sounds like the weather was nice, and that's always a good start. So we'll start off. Apologies for slide reading, but the business slides we kind of got to be business-like on. So today's webinar is hosted by the DBHR through the Washington State Healthcare Authority. This is an interactive training, and we encourage you to ask questions and participate throughout the session. Those of you who've been with us know this already. The slides, as well as a link to the recording of this webinar, will be sent by email after the presentation. I know there were some issues where people didn't get the material, but you can reach out to us or you can reach out to people that connected you with this presentation to get those materials if you're just coming in. About artificial intelligence, please note that the use of automated note-taking bots or similar tools requires prior approval. Unauthorized use of such tools is prohibited to ensure the privacy and confidentiality of all attendees. Any recording created through AI is not recognized as an official recording of this session. We do reserve the right to exit trainees from the training if they are using AI or AI bots to take notes without prior approval or using AI to record the session. And so here we are. So hopefully, I'm hoping I'm not sure if we have any new people who are just coming in now. We've picked up new people along the way. But welcome. This is the fifth of six of these sessions that Joni and I have been doing. And for those of you coming in, please check in the chat. You can tell us your name, tell us what agency you work for, and tell us what brought you to us. If you are a first timer or if you just got here within the last session or two, please let us know that one as well, because you may have some catching up or some materials to do, or some of this may sound strange if you're coming into this in the middle of the way through. But we'd love to hear who you are, where you are, what you're from, and what you do. Now, for those of us who have been here for a while, we've been going through motivational interviewing. We did the training throughout the fall and I guess the early winter. Um, and since then, we've been reviewing the different pieces of motivational interviewing and talking about what kind of luck you've had and what your experience has been with practicing these skills. So last time and this time, we're going to be covering OARS. And I just wanted to check in with you about how it's been working so far. Have you been able to try these things out at work? What has and has not been working well for you? And you can either enter this one in the chat or you can unmute and share with us. We'd love to hear what your experience is, particularly successes that you've had, and also if there were any challenges along the way.
And I'll keep my eyes on the chat. So if you want to write in the chat or unmute, we have a good group today. So let us know what's been going well, what's been happening. Welcome everyone who is introducing themselves in the chat, who are introducing themselves. Let's see.
And I will cheat a little bit. One of the things that I confess that I am looking for is if anyone else had the same experience that I did starting out with motivational interviewing, where the kind of working smarter and not harder piece fit in, the whole idea of being able to hold back on advice and hold back on being directive and let the person do the talking and let them do it by using things like OARS. You let them carry more of the conversation instead of being maybe as directive as we were before. To me, that's sort of the payoff of motivational interviewing is when you don't feel like you're doing all the heavy lifting and really directing that person where you think they should be.
I know our last session, some people were saying some successes have been feeling like you're really hearing what the individual that you're working with is telling you, feeling like you're really more engaged in the discussion, more kind of alert and attuned to what they're telling you by using some of those OARS techniques, but also embodying the spirit of MI that we've been talking about throughout our sessions, kind of that partnership and that collaborative spirit. Yes, David.
Yeah, I guess I felt like I had a good connection with somebody the other day, using the oars. Um, kind of felt some. I felt my own bias, and I felt energy, I guess you could say, but still being able to use motivational interviewing, oars, um, building that connection with the peer. Um, it turned out to be
Hmm.
a great it was a consultation, so it was building that connection right then and there. I've been having some difficulties with individuals that I've been seeing for about a year who um, kind of went back to their use, and so it was that one's been kind of difficult for me. Trying to use motivational interviewing on that. Uh, so that's kind of been my successes and my not so good things. Yeah, it's kind of hard to navigate it now because um, there's no callbacks. That's where I'm at with that. I thought I shared
So,
that.
if you could, David, tell me a little bit more about what the clients that you had that sounds like they had a relapse. How did you use motivational interviewing to connect with them when they're in that place?
To remember the strengths, it was kind of hard to speak because they were under the influence at the time, and so
Mm, gotcha.
there's a lot of talk, and so but there's not a lot of listening. So I listened, right? I just
Hmm.
doing the listening, not trying to give the advice, but also at the same time remember the tools that we learned and just try to put those into practice. That's as far as I got, and it's
Hmm.
been kind of lost in contact. But
Hmm.
yeah, that one was kind of difficult for me because this is somebody that was been working with for about a year, over a year, and yeah, that happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there was no judgment. I focused on strengths as far as say you could do this, you've done it because this was the longest that individual has had with no use was over a year, and so just focus on the strengths and no judgment.
And that's a great affirmation. That and a really nice reframe on top of that, which is, celebrating the year. It is probably we'll probably talk about this more in the next session, but how unrealistic it is that we're going to change something so drastic about ourselves permanently, and that anything short of that is failure. This is the failing forward piece. You learn how to do a year, and then from the year, it's okay. So what happened? And a year is a pretty common interval, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think a lot of people struggle around anniversaries. So the idea of turning that into an affirmation instead of I failed, it's you made it a year. You made it a year. Now, what did you learn about that year? And then now we go back to the blueprint, the change blueprint, and say, all right, now what can we do different? What was it that, because it's reasonable to assume that next year is going to come around again. Some people relapse year after year at a similar, there may be some trauma, there may be some anniversary or something like that. So it sounds like you did a good job of staying with them through that because uh, as we talked about before with stages of change, when people are in a relapse state, very often they have a lot of different emotions going on. They'd be very angry, they could be very ashamed, they could be blaming you, you know, or they could be mad at themselves. And instead you just stay with them, celebrate, make an affirmation out of it. And then how do we go forward? How do we go forward from here?
Yeah, I realized that some me, myself included, when we got to that year, we get to that year point, we start seeing successes in our life and we start reaching all our goals. And then we turn around and we self-sabotage ourselves because of that, not knowing what it's going to look like in the future and going back to the comfortability of just knowing, hey, I'm comfortable back here. I know this at least, right?
I've heard someone say that the addict does not fear failure. The addict knows failure very well. The addict fears success. And so when you're on that verge of that success, there's now all this pressure. I don't know what this place is, so if I sabotage it, and then that's good work for us as well, so the person can explore that. So what is it that set this up? What were the external things that may have contributed to the relapse? And what are the internal things like that may have contributed to the relapse as well? Really, really, really interesting. And again, we can't direct somebody out of it. And it also sounds like, David, you took you out of the equation. The client's relapse is not your fault. You don't take any of that on. That's something that person has to lose, and that can be hard. We share in their successes, but we also share in their challenges and their setbacks. And it's kind of hard to take us out of the equation and just keep it about them, keep it about them moving forward. A relapse is a learning opportunity. So hopefully this person can pick something up out of this experience that they can use going forward. And that's something that you can reference, thinking now about, the different types of summaries where you bring in a summary piece from before. This is something hopefully you'll be able to work with these clients with later on and point that out. You should remember in May when you were talking about this relapse and all this stuff that was going on, and you can bring that in going forward. Very cool. Anyone else? All right, so we have been meeting, and this Joni, am I right about this? This is the fifth of six, right? The days dwindle down to a precious few.
Yes. Yep.
So we've been meeting during this time once a month for these 6 months, doing exactly what we're doing now, getting feedback about how breaking down the different parts of the training, getting your feeling about how you've been doing with it, what challenges you faced, and where it's helped you. So today we're going to be in part two of practicing OARS because I, my own feeling is that OARS is the hardest part to, I don't want to use the word master, but gain proficiency in. You all know how to ask open-ended questions. You know how to affirm people. You know how to reflect, and you know how to do summaries. But it's knowing them well enough where you can consciously sit back and choose, like a chessboard, which piece you're going to move at any given point in time to get the reaction that you're looking for. I know in the beginning for me, I just did whatever one I could think of at that moment. If a reflection came up, that's what came up. If an affirmation came up, that's what came up. But to be able to sit back and go, all right, what's going to be the best move here? Kind of like David said, okay, if I've got a client that's relapsed and they're currently under the influence, how can I shift what I do to match where that person is instead of just giving them the same thing I would have given them before? And then next month we'll be changing gears a little bit and talking more about the stages of change. And thanks to the feedback, we'll focus quite a bit on matching our interventions to where that person is, in the stage of change. So as we were saying before, I don't know, could you give me some feedback on the OARS worksheet? We've been using that for a long time, and my hope is that helps you remember the different OARS techniques and some of the specifics about it. Has anybody been able to use that sheet with someone, whether it's personally or professionally, um, to see if that's helped you to be able to remember to use those skills? I also remember I used to write OARS on all my note sheets. That was my own little cheat, so that I would remember to ask that of people. And
This is the sheet that Ken is referring to. And we were asking for some kind of applied learning, asking you to meet with someone, whether it was someone who's participating in services, a friend, a family, whoever that might be, and practice using open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. And we were asking if you could use the worksheet and identify some of the OARS skills that you used. I'm going to put this in the chat, the worksheet again. And, feel free to respond to those questions. Let me just make sure I'm copying the link here.
Mhm. And if you have any suggestions for how to improve this form, welcome to do that too.
Yes.
I amended the one that came with the book, and added my little notes and my little stuff in there. But if there's some way that can make this more user friendly, um, for you, that would be wonderful as well.
I'm going to pop it in the chat. So as we're talking about it today, we will refer back to the OARS worksheet. You'll have it here in the chat. So I'm going to go back to our slide presentation. And if you could pull up the OARS worksheet on your own device, that would be great. I'm going to go back to our presentation. So yeah, as Ken mentioned, has anyone had an opportunity to practice using OARS? Even if you didn't fill out the worksheet or you weren't 100% aware that you were using OARS, if you can recall some of your previous sessions with individuals or discussions with people over the last couple of months, can you recall using an open-ended question, an affirmation, a reflection, or a summary? So continue to use this worksheet. And as Ken mentioned, you can refine it. You can make it work best for you. I think I added editing privileges so you can actually write on it and modify it to whatever extent works best for you. So consider using this in your interactions to kind of keep note of the times that you're using these different OARS skills and techniques. And
Because
I think
the challenge is changing what you're doing. And so to me, that's a little reminder so that I can throw throw those pieces in there.
yeah. So if we do have a volunteer to maybe share an experience using OARS, not necessarily the worksheet, but those specific skills, how did it feel? What were some of the challenges using OARS? How did the person that you were meeting with respond? Yes, David, thank you.
I can share the most recent, not going by the list, but just kind of in my head. So during a consultation, somebody was referred that doesn't really want to be there. Um, and kind of asking me, kind of knowing a little bit of background, but not just letting the person share their purpose of being here. Asking that open-ended question. Um, the individual didn't want to be there, but was still there. So that's, I don't know how I'm going to explain it. Kind of like the affirmation was that that person showed up,
Mhm.
and I don't know how to explain it, but it was a really good consultation because I felt that from the gate, the person didn't want to be there. This was just something they had to do. And by the end of the meeting, they weren't sure if they were going to stay at the place that they were at. And the individual still wanted to have services here, and we connected really good. It was one of those things when started from the gate, they didn't want to be there. At the end of the day, we're high fiving and shaking hands. So
No, that's
sorry,
great.
I can't communicate that well, but yeah, that was my experience with it. I felt I did all this, um, and it just turned out great. It turned out to be a great connection.
Oh, if you go from somebody who doesn't really want to be there to somebody who's agreeing to have services at the end of that, that's a win. That's a definite win because they already came in. We'll be nice and we'll say they came in ambivalent, but we know they were a lot more close to what we would call resistant or, or even
Mm.
straight up involuntary. Um, so no, that's a really nice way that again, you build that relationship. Change doesn't happen without the relationship. So you worked on building the relationship, and I love working with involuntary clients and taking the approach with them where you say, how can we make this time benefit you? If you have to do this, how can we make this worth your time? So that you get something out of it for your trouble. And if they made it sounds like you made a good connection with this person, which is really critical. Nothing moves forward without that. So
Uh,
that's really crucial. And I'm sure some of your colleagues, and I think I saw some people from the Department of Corrections, where you're not the only person who's working with someone who doesn't want to be there, or even if they don't have to be there, they feel forced to be there by family or by law enforcement or, by somebody like that. And that's a really difficult place to start from. But to me, that's also the stuff that motivational interviewing was designed for. Somebody who comes in who wants to change and they're just looking for a piece or two of how they're going to do it. Okay, we don't need to do all this stuff. We don't need to do all this OARS with them. The OARS is when someone comes in and they don't know what the problem is, or they know they have a problem but don't know what to do about it, or they've had repeated failures or relapses in the case of who you were talking about before. That's what this is for. It really gets people from that pre-change, pre-action stages to that action stage. No, that's really great.
We also have something here in the chat. Someone was working with an elderly client whose spouse recently passed away last year. The person wasn't able to take care of themselves. Um, and after a long conversation, the individual commented that they can't learn all of this themselves. Um, and the case manager, the counselor reflected from our previous conversation that they were able to teach themselves how to learn and play guitar, and he was able to learn these chords and learn them at the same time. And she asked, how did he learn those chords? And the individual answered, one at a time. And I gave him just one of the multiple tasks that needed to be accomplished, and said, "Here is your first chord that you need to learn." And his eyes lit up, and I could see that the connection was made, and realized that he did have the power to start making changes himself. What a lovely story.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like the AA songbook, one chord at a time. That's
Yes, what a
no, that's
lovely
good.
story. Yes, you.
And it broke it down into measurable steps so that that person could do it, and then they get that feeling of accomplishment. Even if it's one
Mhm.
chord, that's fine. That's absolutely fine, because that does its job of the person's made that incremental change, and now there's more of a likelihood they'll take the next one. They've done it already, so
Mhm.
now you're building on success. That
And you're affirming. I heard some affirmations. I heard some kind of bringing in some reflections and summaries from previous sessions into the new session, and kind of using that as a transition. Wonderful.
hmm hmm Well, and who I really want to hear from are the people that have had challenges. If you
Yeah.
felt unsure, if this all sounds good while we're talking about it here, and then you actually get one-on-one with somebody and there's something that's holding you back, or if you started to do it and then something happened, you got a reaction and then stopped, take advantage of this time. Take advantage of it.
Yes.
We not only have Joni and myself, we've got this whole, room of people here that can give you some feedback about how it's worked for them, how they've been able to move this forward. Because you'll benefit and your clients will benefit as well.
Mhm. Let's see, something else here in the chat. Oh, okay. We do have the recording, Sandra. You got kicked off. I don't know how that happened. But yes, thank you for sending in the chat. And we were just kind of commenting on your use of affirmations and maybe some summaries from previous sessions. And what a lovely story. Thank you.
So unless there's any other examples, I'm going to suggest that we, kind of duck back a little bit and cover some of these things. I think some of what the challenge may be is just lack of familiarity with these skills. Again, that I know you do. It's just a matter of knowing them well enough to select them. So what we're going to do is a little more practice from this side while we're all together. So I'm going to review the different elements of OARS just to get them fresh in your mind again. And then what we're going to do is we're going to drill it a little bit so that you get some practice at this right here. So you get your first, it might be your first try at it, or it might be the latest try at it with us in a group together. And so first I'll review this and then we'll go through the drills. So for those of you who aren't as familiar, because I know we have people with a whole range of experience in motivational interviewing here, OARS stands for open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. And open-ended questions, as opposed to closed-ended questions, which are yes or no or short answer questions, like what is your address? The whole idea of an open-ended question is to leave the whole field open so that you can get responses beyond what you're expecting. The example I always gave is our terrible addictions assessment, where we asked everybody about each drug that they used in their life, as opposed to saying, "Can you tell me a little bit about your history with drug use or your history with addiction?" And that way you're free to get whatever answer comes back. And you haven't directed the response with the question. So open-ended questions just give the field wide open for a person to respond to you. Affirmations in a word is praise. Again, we're trying to build that person up. In some of our previous lessons, we've learned that the number one reason that people don't take on a change process is they don't feel they're going to be successful and they don't want to fail and they don't want to come down on themselves like David was talking about with the person, the relapse. Very often there's a lot of emotions of shame and anger and powerlessness and frustration when change doesn't happen the way we want it to. So affirmations can be either just something praiseworthy along the lines of "you look nice today," um, and it can also go on a much deeper level. A much deeper level of praise about the change process. For example, the example of, "Hey, you got a year clean and sober, and that's the first time you've done that. That's really good. That's a long time. A lot of people can't do that." So you're trying to build that person up so that they feel more confident in the change process. So it can be something surface or it can be something deep and meaningful about that person. When we get into reflections again, I think is the hardest part to do. And it's kind of abandoning the questions altogether and making it more about a statement. So sounds like you had a good weekend. Sounds like things have been going well with your change process. Sounds like you've had a difficult time lately. You're just giving the person some version of what they gave you back. In the case of simple reflections, you might just be saying back exactly what they said to you or just saying it in your own words. With complex reflections, as we'll get into in a little bit, now you get a chance to do hypothesizing. You get to take a guess as to what's going on with that person. And the beautiful part about the guess to me and the complex reflections is you can be wrong. One of the biggest challenges that people face is they're afraid to be wrong. You don't suffer for being wrong here because the people want you to get it. They want you to understand. So just the idea that you're trying makes it a lot easier trying to understand. So there's simple reflections and complex reflections, and we'll get into those. We'll isolate those a little bit in a bit. And then the last one is the summaries, and that is wrapping up a an interaction with somebody and just say, okay, so I just want to kind of wrap up and get what we talked about today. And you give it in a very concise package back that shows that you listened to that person. But you also have a couple options as well. You can transition from there, you can end from there, or you can bring in something, from previous sessions in that shows that not only are you paying attention now, but you were paying attention back then as well. And these skills can be used interchangeably. I'm a big fan of using summaries at the end to wrap up or to transition. But you can use these in any which way. Um, the key for me is to vary them so it doesn't sound like cue cards. If every answer begins with sounds like, that gets old real quick. And I've probably overdone that. At the one hospital where I work, they make fun of me because anytime I tell them something, they reflect back, "Oh, it sounds like you're leaving now. Sounds like there was a lot of traffic coming into work." And I was like, "All right, I get it, I get it, I get it." But at the same time, I like that they know it well enough to be able to make a goof out of it as well. So let's do a little practice and break this down and make sure that we're in good shape as far as people knowing what what these different skills are and be able to use them. And you can do this by unmuting, or you can do this by typing in the chat, whatever works for you. I know sometimes we have multiple people using
Yeah.
one computer, things like that.
So we're gonna kind of share some statements, and we would like for you to practice. What would your response be? And as I read the statement, you can use the chat like Ken said. Ideally, if you're in a place to unmute your mic to kind of hear that statement, we'll give a little bit of time for you to use the chat and generate a statement. But we really want to have this learning community be about practicing. And we understand that breakout sessions aren't necessarily the most convenient or optimal way to practice. So we're hoping that this is still gives you an opportunity to kind of think on your feet, and spend, like that, give yourself time to compose a statement. So I'm going to read it, and then Ken will also provide some examples of statements, after we hear from you. And so the first statement here is, I just don't understand my mom. And we want you to reflect content. So remember what Ken said, reflecting content is really just giving us back in a paraphrased way what content. There's no feeling involved right now. It's really reflecting back what the person is telling us in a fresh, different way using your own words. So the first statement is, I just don't understand my mom. One minute she tells me to live close to home, and the next she says, live wherever you want. How would you reflect content back? What would be a good content reflection? You could use some of those starters that Ken suggested. It sounds like what you're saying is, to
Mhm.
kind of get you started with that. What I hear is,
Sounds like you're getting mixed messages from your mom.
yes,
That could
sounds like
be,
you're getting mixed messages from your mom about
I,
where to live.
yeah, I could see how that could be frustrating.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Anyone else?
So this is your shot. If you're not 100% comfortable with using these things, up, here we go. I got something coming in. So yeah, take a shot at it now. You can't do any harm. No harm can be done here. So take your first crack at it and we'll go from there.
So your mom changes her opinions about what you do, and I'm sensing that it's quite confusing and frustrating for you. Yeah, yep, you're capturing a little bit of the feeling too, which we're going to get into, but
Mhm.
absolutely the content is this mixed messages.
Yep. So you can see, it's a nice part about having it typed out is you can actually see it. You can see the content in the front half of it and the feeling in the second half of it.
Yeah,
And again, none of these are wrong. None of these are wrong. It's not like we say, they reflected content instead of feeling. That's not
yeah,
a wrong move. It's just the
mm-mm.
idea that you have the choice. And so for me, working with a client, if it's someone that has a hard time expressing emotions, I might try to lean on their emotions a little bit. I might try to get some, might try to elicit more of that emotion from them. I don't know if you have clients that are kind of up in their head. They don't really acknowledge any emotion. They just talk about what's going on. Maybe that might make the decision to go into more of a feeling
Yeah,
as opposed to a content. Or if you have someone who completely lives in their emotions and they're not really grounded in what's going on, that might be a choice that you might make, what make the difference between. And there's never any harm,
absolutely.
like Tina did. You cover both sides of it, you know. That way the person has the choice. They might focus on the confusion, they might focus on the mom, or they might focus on the emotion. The-
Yeah,
Yes, it's amazingly frustrating,
yes.
you
And
know.
we're gonna practice the feelings as well, the feeling reflections. But it looks like we have two in here
Yep.
in the chats. Tina, so you are confused about where your mom would like you to live and where you would like to live. Yeah. So you're kind of presenting that reflection, identifying some of that emotion, but also certainly that conflict. Troy mentions it sounds like you're struggling where to move with your mother influences this. Absolutely. And I think both of these in the chat here represent kind of a brief reflection. You don't want your reflection to be longer than what the individual is providing you. Absolutely. How about this next one? I really want to start applying for jobs, but there are so many things I need to do to get my resume ready. Just kind of a nice content reflection.
Hmm.
How would you reply?
Man, it sounds like you're
Please.
ready to get to work. Um, what steps do you need to take to get to start getting the resume going?
Hmm. So it sounds like you're getting ready for. So that's another combo by David here. So it started out with the reflecting content and then went into an open-ended question. And you'll
Yeah.
see that when you get more familiar with this, you'll realize that you're throwing out combinations. Again,
Mhm.
it's a great move to do. You might not even realize you're doing it.
Yeah. Uh,
Sound yeah, I see crystals.
Yeah, and Chloe's, it sounds like you would like to start looking for jobs, but would like to update your resume first before you get started. Crystal, sounds like you're telling me you need some support with writing a resume. Um, I'm
Hmm.
hearing you're ready to work and have steps to take before you can apply. So yes, you're reflecting back that the person wants to start, but there are still some things that need to be done. You're a little overwhelmed with tasks to do. It sounds like you're stuck with what to do first. It sounds like you're ready to start applying for jobs, but you're challenged with writing a resume. Excellent.
When you see the feeling in the first half and then the content in the second half, which
Yeah.
again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's great. And then I don't know if I have the name. If I get the name wrong, I apologize. Lucia,
Hmm.
get it,
Actually, it's Lucia, but
Lucia.
it's okay.
Oh, thank you for correcting me. I want to get it right. Uh,
Thank you.
you did a great. What you just did a double sided, and that's great. We're gonna get to that in a minute, but I wanted to point that one out. Again,
Thank you.
nothing at all wrong with that. I'm a big fan of the double sided. I admit I'm completely biased toward them. Um, but if you, so the first half of what she put, it sounds like you're ready to start applying for jobs. Boom. That's a content reflection right there. Uh, Even if you said it sounds like you're challenged with writing a resume, boom, that's another one right there. Those are all that's all content. Now, but the way it's framed, as soon as you make it a but, you've got now both sides. That's like a nice pivot point. But we'll get into that when we'll
Yes,
get to that one
yes.
next. A planning and
You
Thank
Troy
you.
did a version of that too. You're planning to look for a job and preparing to put together a resume. I love the double sided. I'll never get mad for
mm,
that because
and we it's interesting that word but. We try to stay away from the word but, and it's hard. It's very difficult. When you're doing that double-sided, and we're going to talk about it, you want to give equal weight to both sides. So you might want to replace, it sounds like you're ready to start applying for jobs and you are challenged to writing a resume, kind of giving equal weight to those sides. And again, that just takes practice um, and so on. So this last one for content, I've been thinking about attending a support group. So I looked up some that are available in my neighborhood. Any thoughts on the content, kind of just maybe reflecting back the content of what that person is giving you? Excellent example so far.
yep,
Let's see. I'm hearing that you are planning to look for a job and oh, here it is.
I'm preparing. Yep. Yep.
You're taking actions to attend a support group. Great.
Mhm. See, and each one of you have your own way of bringing that,
Yes.
and that's cool. You're hitting the main points of it, but there's plenty of room to move in this. There's no one
Hmm.
gold standard. Oh, you nailed it. There's 100 different ways to get there, and
Yeah.
how you'll know is the person will respond. You'll hear from their respond. They'll come right back with, you know, they'll continue in the direction that they were going and that you went with them, and that's how you know you've gotten it.
And Tina, I love this. So you've considered participating in a support group near your home. Boom. Short and
Hmm.
sweet.
Hmm.
But reflecting back the content, and that person can then follow up and say, yeah, I have. It has to be near my house for it to be really convenient. They'll provide some additional information that you'll kind of feed off of, and you're doing it without asking a lot of questions. Remember, that's what we're trying to do with reflections, is avoid asking a barrage of questions. So here we're moving into feeling. I'm going to read it in a way for you to really hear my emotions. I've been waiting for over a year to enroll in college, and I can't wait. What are you hearing from me emotionally about that? I've been waiting for over a year to enroll in college, and I can't wait.
So someone reflect back what you heard from
Hmm.
Jody as far as
Yes,
how she felt, not
yes.
so much the content, but how she felt about.
And yeah, and you can say something like, you feel, and it could just be a simple statement, you feel, and then pop in that feeling word.
You're excited about going to college.
Yes, you feel
Mhm.
excited. You can even just say, David, you feel excited.
Yeah, it's
Um,
the emotion. The nice part about feelings is they're very straightforward. So, unlike content, you can just say you sound very excited.
yes. And Sandra, I can see that you feel very excited about starting college. Yes.
Hmm.
The second one here, I can't do anything right as far as my teachers are concerned. They return my assignments because they say they're sloppy and incomplete.
So, how
And
does that
again,
feel?
yeah, you feel, Joni, you feel, it sounds like you're feeling.
Hmm. And there's any number of answers to that. It's not one.
Mhm.
It's not just one word. In fact,
No.
part of the fun to me of reflections is being able to guess and going out on a limb a little bit. Because even if
Mhm.
you're wrong, that person's going to bring you right back. So, as Crystal said, frustrated. Hey, you can't argue
Yeah,
with that
yes, yep,
right there.
you got it. Frustrated. worried, nervous, whatever that those other feelings might be. And, again, when we were talking in our more content focused sessions, you want to look at the person's body language. You want to look at how they're telling you this. Are they saying it to you with a head hung low and just really feeling defeated?
Yep, Tina just
Yep,
said
there you go, Tina. Yep, you
it
feel
is
defeated
exactly
when they return your assignments. Absolutely. And then let's just read this last one. Some coworkers invited me to a party this weekend, but I don't know if I should mix work and fun. What would be the feeling that that person is exhibiting?
You feel like you might you might get to know your coworkers better, though.
too well.
Yeah, you could be
Too well.
excited.
Feel like
Yeah,
you
it
have to
could
build
be.
relationships now.
Yeah, it could. You feel excited uh, to get to know your coworkers more. Or Sandra said you might feel apprehensive about sharing
Apprehensive,
home and work
conflicted.
life. You might feel conflicted between fitting in and maintaining boundaries. Troy wrote, you might feel unsure about attending this party. Absolutely, all of those feelings. So
All
the
right on.
feeling reflections, that right on. You nailed it.
Feeling
It sounds a
insecure.
little like the Christmas party that has a story after it. Yeah,
Yes,
you've had that
yes.
experience before. People are still talking about it well after Christmas.
Yes. And there's you're conflicted, you're unsure or excited. So meaning you're blending the two together. You're kind of using maybe a similar type of um, kind of statement or formula, if you will. You can think of it. You feel, and then the feeling word: happy, excited, elated, defeated, unsure, because, and then what that content is.
Hmm.
So here's the first one. My mom's been taking me to my job this past month, but now she says she doesn't have time to drop me off every morning. What would be sort of something that captures both the feeling and the meaning for that?
You feel unsure how you gonna get to work now?
Yeah, you feel unsure because your
Because your
ride has
mom.
changed to work every morning.
You feel anxious? No.
You feel anxious
Yes.
because your mom may not be able to drive you in to work. You feel anxious because your transportation changed.
This is
Seems
also
like you're
an
feeling a
interesting.
bit worried about getting to work. Yes, Ruby.
If
It
you
sounds
if
like
you
you're
know the
frustrated
client,
with the change. I'm sorry. It
sorry, go
sounds like
ahead.
you're frustrated with the change in routine and how to get to work. You feel concerned about losing her support. Absolutely. All of those.
Ellie brought up a really good point. If you know
Yeah.
the client well, this gives you an increased angle because you might know something about them where this hits for them.
Hmm.
Because okay, if you're relying on your mom to take you to your job, and now all of a sudden that's in flux, that's going to hit a lot of us a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Somebody might be really concerned about their independence. Somebody might be more worried about their financial future. What if there's a little one involved? And oh, now if I can't get to my job, then those bills aren't going to get paid for. So there's 100 different directions that that client can come from. And so if part of meaning is exactly as Joni said, you catch some of the content and the feeling. But if you know that person and you know what's underneath that, that gives you a golden opportunity to hit on a theme for that person. Like, what if I'll just make this up, but if the person says, I'm tired of being dependent on other people. Every time I depend on someone, they let me down.
Yeah.
Sounds like you're tired of depending on other people. It sounds like you really want to be independent. And that's a whole other deeper level of meaning, which can really hit for a client that you know, especially if you've been through them through a few laps around the track before.
I went to visit my sister today in the hospital. We had a great visit. When I went to give her a hug goodbye, she looked in my eyes and started smiling, then crying. I think my stopping by made her happy. How would you reflect both that feeling and meaning, or feeling and content? Think about you feel whatever feeling seems to be evoked from the statement because. Yes, the visit felt impactful.
Mm,
That's a,
good word.
yeah. You could even, Troy, add to that. You feel happy, you feel pleased, you feel, excited that the visit was impactful.
Happy for big hug.
Yes, you felt happy. You felt happy for getting a hug. You felt happy for impacting your sister's day.
Mhm.
And then finally, work has been extremely hectic this week. I don't think I'll ever be able to catch up. Sorry if this is hitting home too close to home for anyone here.
I think we can relate to this one.
You feel overwhelmed
Hmm.
Mhm.
because
You
of
feel
Anxious.
work.
anxious about
Yep.
your workload this week. Yes, you feel overwhelmed. Yes, David.
Hmm.
Seems like you feel overwhelmed with all your work.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. So I see the emotion part of it and the content
Hmm.
part of it. And then it's
Yep.
neat because you've put them both out there so the client can choose which one they run with, and that's where they're at. They might be ready to go off of here, just taking Ruby's comment. The person may say, I really need to change things at work. Or they may be all about it's this feeling of overwhelm. Okay, well, wherever they're going, we're going with them.
Yeah.
We're not going to decide we're going to talk about changing things at work, and we're not going to talk about their stress level. We're going to go with them to whichever that part of that there is. There may be something completely unrelated to work that this may go to.
So Ken discussed the double-sided reflection a little bit earlier. You're capturing and highlighting both sides of the person's ambivalence about the change. You're really demonstrating that you're understanding this kind of double bind, this ambivalence that they're in. The person sees both the pros and cons of changing and not changing. We want to make sure we're using and not but, so that we're giving equal weight. So you might say something like, on one hand, and then kind of identify what they're telling you. And then on the other hand, you're kind of, again, recognizing and acknowledging this other side. So let's practice this a bit. I really need a job to pay off my student loans before I get too far behind, but I know I'll just end up quitting or getting fired like all of my past jobs. How would you reflect that in the double-sided? On one hand, on the other hand, so you're kind of helping them see that you're understanding their ambivalence about this decision.
Sounds like you want to get a job to pay off your bills,
And
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 and it doesn't seem like it seems like not following through is a pattern of yours.
yeah, yeah. It sounds like you want to get a job to pay off your bills, your student loan bills, and you've had some experiences in the past with jobs not working out, or whatever David said, not following through, whatever feels right for that person you're meeting with. How about one more? Um, I'm really looking forward to retiring next year. I have some things lined up, like a little traveling and watching my grandson. But what else am I going to do all day?
So let's hear if we haven't heard from you yet, take a swing at this one because double-sideds are really critical. To me, it's the best way to communicate to the client that you get where they're stuck. You've captured the damned if you do, and you've
Mm.
captured the damned if you don't. If you look at the first one, oh my God, my student loans. On the other side, you have uh, I'm just going to quit or get fired again. So you really hear the double bind that that person is stuck in. So to me, this is the key to the lock of getting the change process going. So what do you see? On one hand, we have retirement and traveling in the grandson, and then what
Mhm.
else? So who can take a swing and catch both sides of that?
On one hand, you're worried about keeping yourself active. Yep, that's definitely one side of it that we're hearing. Absolutely, Sandra.
And you can unmute if you want. If you don't want to type it,
Yeah,
say it. Sometimes that's quicker than
yeah.
typing. Hmm.
It sounds like you're excited about retirement and also overwhelmed with the amount of free time you'll have. Yep, you caught it too. You caught that double bind.
Yep. Another good double-sided from you. That's really good. I think that's a really critical one. I think you with nailing the double-sided, you've sent a very clear message to the client. I get where you are.
Hmm.
Which isn't the same as I'm going to save you, I'm going to rescue you, or follow me, I'll get you out of here. But just the validation of I get it. I get where you're at.
Now I have time to learn a new hobby, gardening or learn Spanish. Yeah, yeah.
And you would like to elicit that from the client. You want the client to feel, you don't want to answer the double bind. You want them to answer the double bind. Let them figure it out.
Hmm.
Um,
Here's Chloe. It sounds like you're looking forward to the next chapter in retirement, like traveling and spending time with family. And you're also thinking about what other activities you can engage in.
mhm.
Beautiful.
Yep. Yep.
Excellent.
You kept, and Chloe did something very, very clever here in that she kept both sides as a positive. She turned,
Hmm.
she turned what else am I going to do all day into you're also thinking about those other, you kind of took that next step,
Yes.
like Spanish or like horticulture or like whatever, whatever that's going to be. 100%. And then you've put it on the client to fill that spot, which you want them to do.
So we Ken and I kind of saved this for more of like a follow-up discussion, maybe a little bit of a learning application. So when you're meeting with people that you're working with or even just throughout your day, um, think about how you would respond to the statements using OARS. If you're in this could even be a good kind of team building activity in your team meetings. You can use this exact kind of activity thinking about what statements that you hear from people participating in services and how you might respond. But just in terms of time, we do want to prep you for the next session. So using your OARS worksheet, you can continue to practice those OARS skills, write it down. However, for next session, Ken's going to be following up with a change that you've either made or that you want to make. So you don't have to, we're not going to discuss it as a group, but really think about a change that you've either made or you want to make in your life. Come prepared on the 24th with some ideas about what that change is, because that's going to kind of set the stage for our next session, which is about listening for the stage of change that someone's in and helping to identify different interventions and strategies to match that stage.
Yep. You won't have to discuss what the change is, but we may discuss where you are in the change process. So the change is confidential and private for
Yeah.
you. However, we'll talk about the different features of it and where you may be as far as what task is next to move forward in the change process.
So please, any questions or comments? We've got one more session left next month, and you can bring your questions or comments then, or Ken and I are available by email. So I'm gonna add here in the chat my email address, and I'm also going to add the evaluation, our survey. We'd really appreciate if you could fill out our survey, give us feedback on the session, and using the QR code right there, or I'm going to put in the chat. Maybe Ken already put it in the chat, but let me grab it. I'm going to put the link in the chat if that's easier for people to complete. But we really appreciate your time and look forward to next month.
Catch you next month, and we'll do, I guess we'll be wrapping up at that point.